months. We are fortunate enough to work with SDC unions and IATSE and USA, and we were very fortunate to be the only theater in Florida to get an SDC contract to produce work in October. They would not give us that again with the rates of COVID, so we kind of snuck one in and did a performance in Cambria Park of a musical called Yours Truly, and we were lucky enough to have the creative team come from LA and New York for that 2-week run of that production. Otherwise, everything else we've been doing to try to serve the community. So we created a drive-in movie series that happens twice a month. We have a Trees and Teas festival happening coming up soon in the theater, where patrons can come and view beautifully designed trees from designers from around Naples. We have a one-night only performance of It's a Wonderful Life, the radio play happening in Cambria Park on December 19th. That also is being virtually shown. And then we're doing Footloose in Baker Park at the end of February of 2021, before hopefully moving back into the theater in 2021 in April, as I said. So we, as an organization, really focus on trying to provide arts access to the process of creating the theater. We do serve about 60,000 patrons a year, but really critical to our mission is actually the people who make the theater. So this last year we did over 60,000 volunteer hours, even with COVID, 62,000 volunteer hours from about 700 volunteers every single year. And that could be people who are performing on stage, it could be people who are volunteering backstage, working in the costume shops or the scene shops. So those 700-ish volunteers are led by a professional staff of 25, essentially one head of each department, except for the scenic departments and costume departments, which have additional staff. And we work to try to provide really high quality performing arts experiences, both to an audience and to performers who wouldn't traditionally have that kind of access. And we sort of joke amongst ourselves that we take the starving out of artists, so that some of these artists can have the careers that will help make sure they can live comfortably while also having access to the arts and the creative process. So that's kind of the Naples Players in a nutshell. We also have a robust education program, and we have a wellness program that's dedicated specifically to using arts and theater to improve some of the educational goals for people with disabilities. That could be students who are in the high schools, or it could be patients with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, those kinds of things. And that program has been particularly valuable over the last 8 to 9 months, because we've been doing improv for seniors who are in isolation. So they've had an opportunity to access community, to learn how to laugh. And then also we use some of the therapeutic techniques to teach them how to reduce their stress when they're all alone, and sort of being bombarded with all of what felt like terrible news for so long. So that on top of a competitive college internship program, we have about 300 applicants a year who apply for 6 positions in each of the technical departments, and they live here in Naples and they're paid a weekly stipend, and they come and they get design credits, and so we have a budding relationship with several of the universities, which is very cool. So we try to impact the community as much as we can. We just finished a collaboration with the Naples Botanical Garden last week, and we have another collaboration with the Naples Zoo coming up in January. And that'll be an opportunity for the community to come outdoors to the Naples Zoo and see a mix of performances and also talks by zookeepers. And we're trying to demonstrate the real crossover potential that exists between the sciences and the arts, which is rarely focused on. So that's kind of what we've been up to in a high level, and we appreciate everybody's support who has allowed us to continue to serve the community during this time.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. And from theater, we're going to go to the concert world with Andrew Kurtz. Hi, Andrew.
There we go. Let me just unmute myself. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being so kind as to invite me to be a part of this conversation and to share some time with my colleagues from Naples. Hi, Kristen and Bryce. I'm not sure if we actually ever met. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Gulf Coast Symphony, we are a 26-year-old organization based in Fort Myers. and I've been a Floridian now for 30 years, been here quite a while. And I've also had the pleasure of working with Joel. He actually did some stage management for me when I was running a small theater company. And he did a really cool performance with us on the 50th anniversary of the Apollo mission at Barbara B. Mann. We did music and video, and it was just a great tribute that we did. I guess it was 2 summers ago. Time seems to have warped in the COVID world. Excuse me. So the Gulf Coast Symphony also shut down on March 15th. We were actually right in the middle of our Music Man rehearsals, and I sent an entire company home in the middle, a week into rehearsals. Don't know what's going to my voice here. So I sent them home, and it took quite a while for us to figure out our plan going forward. And what I will say is we took this opportunity as an organization as an opportunity to be creative, to look at resiliency, and to really reimagine who we were as a company and be faithful to our mission, which is creating community through music. And the result was we actually accelerated the timeline on our long-term strategic plan. And we just opened a brand new music and arts community center that had its first performances for the public 2 weeks ago. And it was something we were planning on doing 3 years from now, but with the shutdown, it gave us an opportunity to look more closely at the site, which is a 12.5 acre church campus who we've partnered with. And we basically control the vast majority of the campus 85% of the time. And then the church uses the campus for Sunday services and some of their other events. But we completely renovated their sanctuary. We put in theater lighting, we upgraded their sound system, we put in robotic cameras in addition to adding positions for our regular 5 cameras that we often use at Barbara Mann when we use our iMag screens and multimedia, so that we can do a 10 camera digital stream, live stream recording type session. And we spent October recording 8 concerts that are going to be pushed out now as part of a new digital concert hall. And they were all recorded in the center. We started our cabaret series in our outdoor pavilion, which is limited to 40 people right now because of COVID, last month, and there's some performances this coming month, December. But the big thing that we did is we were able to work with Barbara B. Mann, and we've been doing socially distanced Saturday concerts at 25% capacity, which is less than 450 people, which is almost impossible to break even, as we've learned. And we've had various degrees of success. We've certainly been successful in terms of keeping people safe. The orchestra is rapid tested weekly. Our staff is in semi-isolation all the time. I mean, I live between my home, the office, the theater, and the Music and Arts Center. I don't go anywhere for safety reasons. So we've really looked at how we could both perform safely in our regular big venue, because the Barbara B. Mann seats 1,850 at full capacity. We've looked at how we could create some outdoor performances that would provide a different level of safety. And then we've looked at what we could do in the digital realm to offer opportunities for people to experience us in a new way. And I'd say the difference between what's going to go up in our digital concert hall, which will go live, I believe, this week, and what we had offered for many, many months once we shut down, was, as my colleagues will tell you, archival recordings are meant to be just that, really not to be seen in mass, but really to be a record of what you've done, maybe to use snippets for grants. But the production values, as good as they might be, are not going to be as refined as you would if you're going to produce something that's going to be consumed as Netflix would, or something that was being streamed. And so we've had to up our game and really recreate what we're doing and spend hours in the recording realm to make sure that what we'd be broadcasting would not be the same experience of what people saw in the months. We've been fortunate, like the Naples Players, the core orchestra, the Gulf Coast Symphony, is community-based. We've always had a small group of professionals that were part of us. The other big change that was, again, an acceleration up from our strategic plan is we have moved forward with our Gulf Coast Chamber Orchestra, which is fully professional. So the recordings are the chamber orchestra. In other words, the chamber orchestra was doing all the professional recording. For the socially distanced concert, it's been 50-50. Half of the people on stage have been the professionals, and half the people on stage have been the regular Gulf Coast Symphony. Part of it is need. Many of my orchestra, I'd say 50% of my orchestra, will not play until there's a vaccine. And that's true of some of the professionals as well. And then we made the decision, even though we'll eventually hold auditions nationally for the chamber orchestra, we decided it was more important to help support the livelihoods of many of the local musicians who literally were running out of money. And so our chamber orchestra is right now made up of players from the Sarasota Orchestra, the Orlando Philharmonic, the Southwest Florida Symphony, the Naples Phil, and some other Boca-based musicians who literally, this has been their lifeline for the past couple of months, because this was their first paycheck in almost 8 months, and their unemployment had run out and all that other stuff. So we feel that we've been able to serve the artist community, the professional community, and also our regular core constituency. I'm going to just say one more thing. At the Music and Arts Community Center, there's going to be a full program of chamber orchestra, chamber music, a jazz program, classes, and fully staged opera and musical theater. We have been doing a fully staged opera and musical theater piece every year at Barbara Mann, but now we'll be doing 3 or 4 of both. Smaller ones at the MAC, and then the larger ones once a year at Barbara B. Mann. So it's given us more flexibility. The Gulf Coast Symphony's budget, just by comparison, has been around $2 million. We somehow managed also to end last year, which was our 25th anniversary season, and we were literally breaking all records when we shut down right in the middle. We did end, because of, I think, our fundraising for our 25th anniversary, solidly in the black. Also, like the Naples Player, I think our budget's going to be about half, somewhere closer to $1 million, maybe 1.2 this year, because we've lost nearly $1 million of revenue, projected revenue at this point, for all the productions that we canceled from March. And I've redone, and Kristen, maybe you'll add to this, I probably redone my performance scenario about 100 times. And so I'm just putting the final touches on January through May, and I'm having to redo 4 shows, and I've canceled shows, and all the time trying to stay very safe. And I'm working with a team of physicians locally who give me information about the safety levels. So even this week, we're doing the Nutcracker this weekend. We canceled a rehearsal with the dancers, and we've moved all of our rehearsals to the hall because it's a bigger space and a little bit more safe than our main space now at the MAC, where we've done renovations to HVAC and all that. But I just feel it's safer with 40 dancers to be at the main space than in our smaller space. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Kristen, you're up. It's your turn. Hi.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you today. My name is Kristen Coury, and I'm the founder and producing artistic director. In business terms, that means CEO of Gulfshore Playhouse. And I moved here 17 years ago from New York City and determined that there was a niche to fill between the wonderful work that the Naples Players does with community-based people, and at that time it was called the Naples Philharmonic, that brings professional Broadway tours around, but they're not produced by them, they're presented by them. So I knew there was a sort of a niche to fill in between with professionally produced theater that used actors that came from outside the market. Equity actors, typically, 99% of the actors we use are members of the Actors Equity Union. So that's the world's, that's the nation's oldest actors union and a professional actors union. And we do use other unions as well. To Bryce's point, we do work with the Society of Directors and Choreographers. We work with the United Scenic Artists, and we work typically very, very well with Actors Equity Association. So what Bryce was talking about is that when the pandemic hit on March 13th, we had one show on stage, and we had another show that was right in the middle of rehearsal, Wine in Winter. So on March 16th, we actually closed down operations. We learned as well that the Norris Center, where we have been producing since 2006, was also closed because it is a City of Naples building. It was going to be closing on March 17th. So on March 16th, we sent nearly 20 professional actors and stage managers back to New York. And on March 17th, I laid off 3/4 of my staff. It was a tough week, I can tell you. Since I started Gulfshore Playhouse, I don't think there was a week as tough as that. So and happily, there hasn't been a week as tough as that since. So we were down to a core of 8 of us at that time. We called ourselves the G8. And we had really daily meetings. And the meetings at that point were focused on how do we get through 2020? Because at that point, it was really impossible to determine how fast this pandemic might be over. When would we be able to get back on stage again? How could we get on stage safely? But we knew first and foremost, our goal was get through 2020 and still be alive and still be in the black, you know, and all of that. So we did end our fiscal year on June 30th in the black, thanks to the decisive measures that we took in immediately cutting our expenses. We laid off people as quickly as we did because we were clear if we weren't going to get back on stage for the rest of the season, there was no reason to have our production staff on board and many of our administrative staff as well. So we quickly made cuts. As painful as it was, it helped us to stay alive and remain solvent. We had to keep a core of our people on. We kept people on from the artistic team, from the production team, from the development team, and from the finance team, so that we could continue to plan and create whatever was going to come next. We did create something over the summer. We did our classes online on Zoom, as well as we created something called Artful Distancing, which was kind of an artful talk show. We talked about, we had playwrights, we had producers from Broadway, we had all actors reading scenes from plays. So we had all kinds of things going on. It was weekly, every Wednesday at 3 p.m. And that was very well attended and fun to do over the summer while we were still figuring out what to do. We had thought that we were going to have to cancel both of our summer camps. We do have a very robust education program as well. It has 3 components. The first component is the obvious stuff you would imagine, teaching kids 6 to 18 how to sing and dance and act. And we've got productions that we do regularly as well. And we have a community partnership component. We work with the Holocaust Museum, where we've written a play about a survivor that we perform in schools. We are in the process of writing a second play about a local survivor that we will also tour into the schools once we can tour back in the schools again, because obviously everything is screwed up this year. And we also work annually with the Naples Philharmonic, and we do a fully musicalized Shakespeare with professional actors that we bring from New York to the entire 11th grade of Collier County, which we provide free of charge to them every year. This year, we'll be doing it virtually. So we will be recording that Midsummer Night's Dream and bringing it into the schools. And our third component is, what is our third component? In-school programming. So we actually teach content curriculum through the use of theater as a tool. So it might be that it's a 4th grade social studies class and the kids have to study the Civil War. And so we'll say, okay, you're Harriet Tubman, you're Abraham Lincoln, you're Robert Fulton. And the kids have to research their character and write their own monologue, and they perform it for their peers in their classroom after sort of 8 sessions. And it's a fun and engaging way for kids to learn. That isn't the typical, like, go home and read this chapter and fall asleep in the middle of it or watch a film strip. So that's not only enjoyable for the students, but actually we employ professional development as well. So the teachers are learning how to use this methodology for other subjects of their own. And we'll do that for anything from language arts to science to math to the obvious, you know, theater classes and music classes as well. So those are the 3 components of the education program. But in the summer, typically we'll do 2 summer camps. Earlier in the summer, we'll do one for the kids age 6 to 13. And then later in the summer, we usually do our teen program, Star Academy teen program, ages 14 to 18. So we thought at the beginning, since the Norris Center was still closed and the state was still on lockdown, that we were going to have to cancel both. But we had already cast our production of Addams Family, and we sort of kept it in our back pocket, wondering if we were going to get it through. And in the middle of July, or I guess it was the end of June, Governor DeSantis opened up the state a little bit more and said that summer camps could go. So we actually went forward and we did our production of our teen Star Academy program of Addams Family. And it was a great opportunity for us to employ all of the protocols that we had put in place for producing inside. We knew we were at 50% capacity. We had worked on that seating chart with the fire chief. And so all of our seats were socially distanced and had no one in front of them or to the side in either direction. And all the kids wore masks all the time. We worked in pods of no more than 9. We took temperatures coming in the door. We bought all kinds of electrostatic sprayers and sanitizers, and we're spraying things left and right before and after classes, before and after performances, et cetera. And we successfully had 3 performances of this show. The kids either wore masks or face shields, and happy to say, I don't need to knock wood anymore because it has happened and it has gone by. No one got sick. We kept everyone safe. So that was a great starting point for us to figure out how to employ our health and safety guide so that we could give it to the Actors Equity Association. We had decided to cancel the first 2 shows of our season and asked our associate artistic director, who's also a Broadway actor, Jeff Binder, to write a one-man show so that we could have perfect safety on stage, in our opinion, right? One man on stage. And we thought, and we had talked about it with our rep at Equity in June, and they had said, oh, that sounds like a great idea. But throughout the summer, they proceeded to lay off more and more of their staff, and the other staff that's still on board is furloughed. So they're gone every other week, and you never talk to the same person twice. And the long story short is that we provided our health and safety guide, and ultimately 1 week before we were supposed to start rehearsals for hire, they said, no, we couldn't go into rehearsal because the numbers were too high. They are looking for a rate of 5 out of 100,000 cases. And in case you haven't noticed, I don't think anywhere in the country has 5 cases per 100,000 or less, which is therefore, I feel, really irresponsible and short-sighted of them. I convinced them to let us rehearse because Jeff and I already share an office at work, and we've been careful, wearing masks and all of that. So they allowed us to rehearse as long as our stage manager was on Zoom. And at the end of the day, they would not let us perform it on stage. So in case any of you have followed the national news, the Actors Equity Association is fighting with the Screen Actors Guild. And because a lot of producers are deciding, well, if they can't perform, Equity just will not say yes. We're going to go and film it, and we're going to get a contract through the Screen Actors Guild. So that's just what we did. We told them, we were very forthright. We were like, okay, if you won't let us do this, then we're going to go to the Screen Actors Guild, and that's what we did. So we were able to Andrew's point about not being able to film it the way we normally would. Normally, Actors Equity would never let us do anything that would be artful enough to actually put in front of people on a screen. It's just like put up a camera and press go, and it's just not pretty enough. But because of this tiny gap between times when before Actors Equity and SAG had worked out this deal, which they have now worked out, we were able to get a SAG contract, which they were so different than the Actors Equity Association. They were focused on getting their members back to work. They were happily able to disclose who the members of their health and safety committee were, which Equity wouldn't even disclose. They were willing to let us talk to them directly and explain what our health and safety guide employed and what our situation was within our space. And they said, you know, here, get an extra ventilation unit, get a couple of extra COVID tests because we are already all tested weekly. And you're good to go. So we shot the film and we're currently in edit for that. We should have it be done. It'll probably be done by December 10th. And so we'll have that for release for people to purchase, but also we'll be distributing it to the schools for free, to the high schools, for anybody who would like to employ it, along with a study guide as well, so that we're still trying to maintain a presence in the schools, even though they're not allowing outside people to go into the schools at this point. We're still remain committed to our mission to serve through professional theater and unique educational opportunities. And then finally, we're in the middle of a capital campaign for ultimately it's a $60 million project, and we intend to break ground sometime in the spring of 2021. And it'll be a 40,000 square foot building with 2 theaters, a 350 seat space and a 125 seat space. The 350 seat space is a more proper main stage with a size of stage the size of a Broadway stage. Because we do have, my background before I came to Naples was in commercial theater. So we have a lot of relationships with Broadway producers, et cetera. And nowadays the model is for Broadway producers to actually partner with regional theaters to create new shows like Jersey Boys or Come From Away or Dear Evan Hansen. They all started at not-for-profit regional theaters. And so that's what we hope we'll be able to grow into as we get into the new building. It has we're calling it a theater and education center because it does have a large wing that has rehearsal rooms and classrooms and boardrooms and things like that. And also a big rehearsal room that we will certainly use as a rehearsal room, but it's off the lobby and we have fitted it out with very fine amenities so that it can be used as a rental space as well. Knowing that Naples just doesn't have enough rental spaces for luncheons or small parties or weddings or whatever, because for example, you know, I've spoken at many things like this in person, or Rotary Club meetings, or sorority alumni meetings, et cetera. And they're always struggling to find space. So that'll be another space we'll have available to the public, as well as our lobby will be open all day and our gardens as well. So, so we're really excited about that bright future as well, and excited to get through COVID so that we can get people back to work. We do have 2 things planned. We're doing a benefit of a reading of a play called Love Letters in January, starring 2 of our favorite actors, Maureen Silliman and Bill Perry, both from New York, who are married. So we figured 2 married people on stage was as safe as 1 person alone on stage. And so we'll be doing that as a benefit at the end of July, July 6th, I mean, Freudian slip, at the end of January, January 16th through 31st. And then we're actually writing a cabaret show for a friend of ours who closed on Broadway on March 13th as well, in A Bronx Tale. And he's a really talented singer, dancer, actor. So we're writing a 1-man cabaret show, because cabaret shows are not under the auspices of equity. When we couldn't do higher in November, we quickly scheduled 3 cabaret shows in November with 3 fantastic Broadway ladies. The first one, Laura Osnes, who's a 2-time Tony nominee, she came down and when people applauded after her first song, she said, "That's the first applause that I've ever had in 8 months." And so while we're here talking to you about trying to stay in business, think about the actors and the artists who are all out of work and have been out of work for now the better part of a year, and with no end in sight. And what that's doing to their hearts and souls, but also keep mindful of what it's doing for your to your hearts and souls, because arts are the way we continue to share our humanity and remember how it is to walk in another person's shoes. So is a dearth right now without the arts, and we're hopeful to get back to work soon.
Hey, thank you, Kristen. Thank you. All right. I guess we're open now for anyone to want to throw questions at our guests. So who wants to go first? Any questions for anyone? No?
Stunned silence.
Arnold is ready.
I'm ready with a question. And then maybe I just read it wrong, but Andrew, it seemed to me that you also have some involvement in an event or a program called Cantors and New York Cantors. Did I read it right?
That is correct.
Tell me about it.
Sure. So I have specialized in Jewish music. Just it was sort of one of those things that happened. And you may have seen the, it was a PBS special, Cantor's Faith in Song, that toured like, it's almost 20 years. And I was asked to be their international tour conductor. So they recorded it for TV and then it toured all over the world. And I did everything in North America and South America. They had a different tour conductor for Europe. That shut down about 12 years ago. And this same producers created a new show called New York Cantors, which are 3 of the quote hottest younger New York based cantors. And that show also was on PBS. And then it was also recorded in Amsterdam originally because it's cheaper there. And then I was asked to be the tour conductor, and we had just started touring. We played New York Central Park and a couple of other places in the US. And I had 3 dates that were supposed to happen in Florida that were all canceled because of COVID. So hopefully that'll go back on the road. So I don't know if that completely answers your question.
Well, it does, because I listened to some recordings of that. Spectacular. And moving.
Well, thank you. Yeah, hopefully I was supposed to bring it to Fort Myers actually next year. It's been pushed a year because of the cost of the show. And it was supposed to go to Boca and Fort Lauderdale. But again, both of them got postponed.
May I ask each of the speakers to talk just briefly about the philanthropy through all of the COVID? How have your donors reacted to knowing what situation you're in and knowing that the future is kind of crazy, but have they been supportive? Have they been wary? What are you seeing from donors?
I'll speak to that. We right away knew that we were going to have to rely on philanthropy probably for a year or more. And usually a healthy arts organization, not-for-profit arts organization, usually employs about a 50-50 ratio. A 50-50 ratio is considered very healthy. If it veers too far in one direction, then you're too reliant on productions being successful. And if it goes too far in the other direction, you're too reliant on philanthropy. And any of the threats out there could change any of those. So 50-50 is considered safe. And we have maintained 50-50 for the first 16 years. And right away we knew, oh God, we don't know, we can't guarantee any money coming in from productions for the foreseeable future. So we did right away, the first step we took was, the cuts, obviously, which I mentioned, but then the first hardy step we took was just to try to ask everyone if they would consider turning their ticket purchases that they had purchased for the last 2 shows of our season, which were therefore canceled due to the lockdown, if they would consider turning them into a donation. And I'm pleased to say, nationally, I think the average is about 15 or 20% of the people turn their tickets into donations, but we had a rate of 58% of our ticket holders turn their tickets into donations, which we were extremely pleased by. And honestly, that was the amount of money that we ended up over when at the end of the day, when we had a surplus at the end of our fiscal year. Was the amount of money strictly donated back by the people who had held tickets. We did apply for a PPP loan, and we received a PPP loan, so that a Paycheck Protection Program loan. We haven't actually used that money yet. It's still in our bank account, but we expect full forgiveness on the full amount, so we'll be able to employ that, which will be very, very, very helpful. And we're hopeful that there'll be another act such as that put into place in the spring. With the acknowledgement that Broadway is still out of business and all of the artists are still out of business for the most part, we hope that the government will help again. But our donors have been extremely kind and extremely generous and really, really understanding. I mean, we almost don't have to make the case, because the national news is making the case for us, and everyone realizes how important it is to keep the arts in business and keep the arts alive. And just a couple of performances that we had, even our Addams Family performances and the cabaret shows that we did, people are just saying, thank you so much for doing this, because it really keeps our hearts and alive, and we're grateful for it. So I think people have an interest in wanting to keep us going.
Yeah, Bryce, isn't that, didn't we have a good response on tickets being returned also, I think?
Yeah, we had about 40, I think it was about 46% of our audience who had tickets turn them into donations, which we were very thankful for. And we've also seen generally that that people have been very generous. In fact, of the donations we got since March to today, about 40% of them are from brand new donors who had never donated before. So people feel motivated to give to something they believe in. We definitely see that the larger donors feel the pressure of the stock market or stock market futures based on what's happening with the coronavirus. So when we see the coronavirus start to surge, we start to see hesitancy to donate surge as well. And so at the end of the year here, people's donations are going to be critical for everyone. We're very fortunate that Jay and Patty Baker have pledged to match $50,000 of donations this month. But generally people have been very, very willing to understand the need for support. We also got a PPP loan, which was critical to us and our success as we move forward. And frankly, another one will be critical as well. I think we're looking at about $1.6 million in lost revenue this year. We were also having the best year we've ever had by a long shot. We were at 99% capacity on the season. And so we happen to be in an excellent cash position. So we have a very strong endowment. And we luckily didn't have to pull from the endowment until the stock market had recovered. So we were in a good cash position that allowed us to keep our staff on. And our board of directors felt that there was real value in keeping our staff employed and moving through the pandemic. So we're very, very fortunate that we even had the opportunity to do that. Not everybody does. But hopefully people will continue to understand the value. What we do see happening is the arts are feeling less important now to some other needs in the community. And, you know, I think it's important for people to have a sense of how the arts impact the community where they live. You know, it's so important for us to tell the stories of the local people, but more importantly than that, it's a massive economic driver, especially for the state of Florida. Most people don't believe that the GDP of arts and culture in the United States is $800 billion. It is larger than the GDP of transportation. It is larger than the GDP of, agriculture. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, you know, if we don't support the arts, we're really talking about a massive industry that will play a major role in the sort of downward trend of the economy. And locally in Collier County, you have to remember that there is not a county tax that supports arts and culture. In the city of Naples, there is no performing arts fund for organizations like ours. So our only hope is in the state, which is 49th in the country for funding. And other than that, then it needs to come from a national level. So our organizations really depend on those kinds of contributions. And like Kristen, I think this last year we were 56% earned revenue from ticket sales and, you know, 44% contributions. So, you know, when we see that 56% go away for 13 months, that's a huge hit. And even though people are like, well, why don't you just open back up? The governor says there's no restrictions. It's just simply not that easy. And our surveys clearly demonstrate that people are not that interested in going and sitting next to the stranger at the theater right now. So even if we allow 50% of our audience back in, suddenly we're only looking at 25% of our operating budget coming from earned revenue. So it really is not as simple as just open your doors and do performances as much as some people would like it to be.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I'm in a similar situation. In the orchestra opera world, the ratio is about 70% philanthropy to 30% tickets. For the Gulf Coast Symphony, it's generally 38% ticket sales, 62%. Roughly, we're more at a 60-40 balance. We also got a PPP. I felt it was critical for me to maintain my staff because trying to rebuild. So I kept all my staff on, and I actually hired 2 new people once we opened the Music and Arts Center because I needed a director for that and a technical director. So I added payroll. We did apply for and got an SB, the Small Business Association loan, which we were able to use to pay for the renovations because we're $100,000 in on renovations right now on that facility. It's shocking how much it starts to cost to put in lighting, and my colleagues will tell you. My biggest priority has obviously just been to maintain the organization and our monthly operating costs. It was pared down some, but still run close to about $35,000 a month. That's doing nothing. Now that we're actually back to performing, it's much higher. We I was able to raise enough money, and people were very generous in the beginning between the PPP and people's donations, which were a little bit higher than normal as they gave their end of the year. Our fiscal year ends in June. That we could make it through now with no extra money, but we're just launching a $100,000 campaign to kind of take us through the next months. We really would need a PPP because it, you know, what we've learned, and just so you both know, I've now been back in the theater. So even if I went to full capacity, my average audience in Barbara Mann has been running about 250 people, which is like 12%. And when we had these 7 concerts, I think we'll maybe break even. We're going to 50% in January for our concerts at Barbara Mann. The problem is, by killing 50% of the seats, I'm actually killing more than 50% of the higher price seats. So it only leaves me with a revenue potential of about 40% of normal, which makes it really hard to even break even. And we see a reluctance of people to come back, even people who have said in the surveys that we've done that they're coming back. There is a group of people who will come, but it's not our core audience. So I don't think just because we're now going to have 900 seats available, that all of a sudden I'm going to have 700 people in the hall. And so, you know, I've had to bring my costs down. I work with a lot of professional performers, and we've had some issues with Actors Equity not being willing, because we do some equity so we've found ways around all of this. But, you know, the number one priority, I think, is to remind our community how important the arts are to them, the people who've been coming. And it's an investment, just like anything, just like an investment in the stock market. And if you invest in us now, we will emerge at the end of this. And the end is in sight. I mean, the time horizon may be 6 months, it may be 9 months, but we're nearing the end, and we'll be able to emerge healthy and strong. Because if we get squeezed in the next 6 months, it's going to hurt us, because we're going to have to claw our way back. Because if you have to rebuild staff and you have to rebuild all the things that you were doing, it's very, very difficult. It's not a switch that we can turn. And so, you know, I even took a 1/3 pay cut. I was the only one that took a pay cut. But that was my decision, because I wanted to do everything I could to keep this organization afloat. And, you know, we're in a pretty healthy financial position, but it could get really dangerous for this organization if January, February, March, if we can't sell tickets and people don't donate, I don't know what we're going to do to be able to maintain our operations, unless Congress steps in and does another PPP round, because it's all about just maintaining the cost of staff and keeping the lights on in our offices.
Yeah, to Andrew's point, that's what I meant when I said, you know, we knew our goal was to try to get to the end of 2020. We actually held firm for a long time on not changing our spring season, hoping against hope that a distanced audience at 50% capacity was going to be enough. But it became clear, I mean, if anything, we're surging worse than we've surged before. So doing a 6-person play or whatever just was not going to work. So to Andrew's point, right at the beginning, when you said, you know, we've had plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan Z and a half, you know, and so now, like I said, we're doing this 2-person benefit and a 1-person cabaret. And then we'll see at this point what March and April brings, but I'm pleased to say we've built back most of our staff. We were able to bring back, but it's a real question now with the board. You know, do we? The board is as committed as I am to keeping that staff now back to work. We don't want to have another string of layoffs. We don't want to go dark during a time when we're in the middle of a capital campaign. Like, none of it makes sense. So keeping going is vital, but to Andrew's point, at 50% and also maybe not full at 50% because people are just nervous. No matter how safe we work on keeping them, you know, it's still nerve-wracking. And we just don't, at this point, the budget, we're voting on budgets in quarters at this point. We're not even,
That's what we're doing.
to do an annual budget. And the budget, if we do run 3 shows between January and March, they're going to be negligible income. So it's still a very philanthropy-based model, and will be probably for the next 9 months.
I have a question for all of you. How has your PR, your promoting the theater, been impacted? Have you cut down on print? Are you doing more internet or broadcast radio ads, things like that? So if anyone wants to start with that, pick up on that.
I've cut everything.
Yeah, exactly. That was the first thing I got, no question. You know, there's $200,000 annually that I could just take out of the budget right then if I wasn't going to pay for press. And at the time, we didn't have any press to run anyway. So we've shifted quite a bit to change the narrative about the value of arts in the community. And so, you know, things like an annual report, which I'll actually send everybody a private message here. You can go look at our website to see our annual report that just came out this week. Other than, you know, some printing for our donors, we've tried to keep everything digital. We took our playbills all online, and we've only recently begun to re-engage with some of our partners to get new print advertising underway. We have found that the publishers are also dying because no one is paying for money. And so, you know, I can get a rate that's maybe 10% of what it would have been 1 year ago. So that's beneficial. We'll see how long those last. That certainly makes me more inclined to go with press. You know, the digital advertising route is certainly an easier way to pay for money because it's much easier to measure the impact of those campaigns. So we certainly have put money forward in that capacity as well. But otherwise, you know, we really have cut back pretty significantly.
Kristen?
Yeah, well, I guess the message here is that you've got 3 very responsible art leaders on this call who are doing their best to make the cuts necessary and the hard decisions necessary to stay in business so that we're still here for you when the pandemic's over. We did the same thing. We cut all of our expenses. And not only that, we actually work with a firm, a PR firm that we employ typically on a monthly basis. And we actually just cut them down to a very minimal amount of hours per month between March and October, and didn't bring them back on full salary until November when we knew we were going to start to employ things. We've got, you know, we thought we were going to be performing, but we'll still be selling film. We're selling our 2 kids shows that we're doing in December. We are actually partnering with a Broadway producer, and we're releasing a one-man show version of A Christmas Carol starring Tony Award-winning actor Jefferson Mays. So we're doing that as well. And so there are things we need to market, but we're definitely not spending the money on marketing anywhere near, even when we have something to market, we're not spending the amount of money. We used to invest a lot in print. We're not doing as much of that. It's mostly digital, and just focusing on getting the word out to be sufficiently enough to get the numbers we need and no more.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done like 2 print ads, I think, in happenings, and we did 1 radio campaign for last week's concert. And but we are about to move forward with our digital campaign. We work with a national company that handles all of our digital placements, and we're teasing it back in starting in December. Because if we're doing shows, we're about to announce a pretty, for me, aggressive season, even though it's 1/3 of what was expected. From January through May, we have to start selling it somehow, and it can't just be with just the emails. So we are about to spend probably $3,000 a month on digital, but that's a fraction of what we normally would spend. That's probably what we would spend in a week. But again, my revenues are going to be a fraction of what we spend. It's all, I think all of us are saying the same thing. We're all trying to figure out how do we get to July 1. And hopefully at that point we'll be operating under a much more normal model. Although I will say, as I'm also projecting quarterly budgets. It's interesting, Kristen, you're doing that. So I only present very small snapshots to my board because everything else is fantasy. My long-term budget, though, for next year is still projected at a 30% loss for tickets over what my normal would have been. Because I don't think that it's going to be like turn the switch and everybody's back in the theater next year. I think there's going to be like a year where we're still somewhere in the middle. And then hopefully 2 years from now, we're back to where, you know, we're selling 1,400, 1,500 tickets per show for Barber Man.
Okay. Hey, Joel, Carol Green has a question she put on chat. Any estimates on how many performers have had to leave the profession in order to put food on their tables?
A lot.
Yeah, almost all. If you know anything about Actors Equity, I concur 100% with Kristen's assertion that Equity has failed their members. You know, these are people, many of whom have not worked in over a year, and the way the union works is you have to work X number of months, X number of weeks every 6 months to earn your health care. And now that they haven't worked in over a year, they cannot earn that health care. And so all of those people are going to be losing their health care and their coverage. They're going to have to find jobs, if they haven't already, to get health care even, not to mention to pay their bills. So I'm not sure, I don't know, Kristen or Andrew, if you've seen any specific statistics, but I would think most of the industry at this point has had to find something to help sustain themselves.
I'll put it this way. The fellow who's playing principal oboe in my orchestra is typically the principal oboe of the Sarasota Orchestra. Amazing musician. He's working as a barista during the day now, to pay his bills.
Yeah, I mean, I have a guy who works with us quite a bit, who works regionally all around the country. He's a professional actor, has been on in movies, major film releases, series that are on Netflix. I mean, he's all over the place, and right now he's working in construction. And that's, I think, a really great example of just everybody, because between SAG and Equity, there's about 160 or 70,000 union members. And to the Laura Osnes, I mean, here's a 2-time Tony nominee who says, I haven't gotten applause in 8 months. You know, I mean, there's nothing going on. So either they're lucky enough to be supported some other way, or they're finding other work. And that's, I think, one of the biggest travesties of what Equity is doing, is that they're not only threatening theaters by possibly putting them out of business because they can't do the business. I mean, I said to them, are you telling me I've got a governor that says we can perform? I've got a city that's letting us do it at a certain capacity. I've got the staff back, the set ready, the play is written, and the money to do it, and the audience willing to come. And the only reason I can't do this show is because of you. Like, are you telling me when I lay off all my staff again, you're going to tell, and I'm going to tell them that you're the reason? And they were like, oh, we're not the reason. The pandemic's the reason. But they're being irresponsible by not finding a safe way to let us all go back to work. Because this is, so not only are they threatening putting theaters, but they're also really, I mean, first of all, to say they're trying to keep the actors safe by doing that, when the actors are going to be forced to work in construction or in restaurants or grocery stores, where they're going to be far more at risk than they would be on a stage, being tested weekly, potting with all the rest of the actors that they're on stage with, you know, and we're jumping through hoops to make sure they're kept safe. And Trader Joe's is certainly not going to go to the same extent, I wouldn't think. So they're really running the risk of having people not come back to the sector when theater becomes alive again.
I can't tell you the number of friends I have in the industry, from people who work at the Met, who've been directors at the Met for years, who are just leaving the industry, and possibly permanently. Like they're taking this as and they're not necessarily like old and at the end of their career, they're in their 40s. And it's like, you know what, this is a hard enough profession, I'm done. And they're going into real estate, they're going into construction, they're going, you know, starting company, and who knows? So I think I'll be curious to see what the long-term impact is, because this is a hard enough profession for anyone to make it in. And it's just really a travesty when you see people who are at the top of their careers having to do other things. And and considering leaving, I think we're going to lose some real talent as a result of this, because they just can't feed their families. And at this point, they're desperate and they're trying to figure out ways to survive, because certainly unemployment runs out too. So even if they were fortunate enough to get unemployment or PPP, it's gone on for so long that it's, you know, it's devastating. Yeah. So I'm a little concerned.
So much, Andrew, Kristen, and Bryce. An amazing hour of the behind the scenes of what's happening. in, as you called it, your industry, you are business leaders trying to run businesses through a pandemic. And I'm in awe of what you've had to do and what you continue to do in terms of planning and trying to be available to us for, in our community, for the rest of the decades to come. So thank you for everything that you've done. Joel, thank you for bringing together this incredible panel. Tom, thank you for hosting the Press Club event. We will be getting together again next Thursday for our annual meeting. I hope you will join us. It's an annual meeting of Press Club, which we'll talk about our successes for this past year and our plans, but we also get to honor our Young Journalist Award winner, Sean Martinelli from NBC2. He'll be in the program and presenting some of the work that he has done in his special role with NBC. So we're really excited to honor him as our 3rd annual Young Journalist Award winner. Bob, go ahead. Oh, 4th annual, sorry. The committee has worked so hard. So we hope to see you then. Our dues for next year remain $50, a very good bargain. So we'll hope that if you're not a member, please join. Check out our Press Club website. We've got a Facebook page and now a YouTube and a Zoom account. We are really moving forward. Thank you all for being here today. It was a pleasure to hang out with my Press Club friends and our friends from the artist community. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Hope to see you in the theater sometime soon.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you. Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you, everyone. Good to see you all.